The following program is an HLN special presentation.
Now, Michael Jackson was a huge star.
He was a superstar, an icon.
He's someone that naturally attracts our attention.
He lives in this pantheon that is shared with very few people. Marilyn Monroe, Elvis.
His story is both spectacular and tragic.
He seems to us to be peculiar and mysterious, but he's also clearly uncannily talented.
It's not just that he was talented. We're talking about a pop singer who had tremendous controversy around him.
It's almost like there are 3 or 4 different Michael Jacksons.
Who is the real Michael Jackson?
He was a one of a kind.
And then he dies. He's taken away from us so suddenly.
There was mystery surrounding his life. There's mystery surrounding his death.
You've got to ask yourself, how did it all come to this?
I'm Nancy Grace. Thanks for being with us. Michael Jackson, a music legend, possibly the most famous man on the planet, his troubled life and devastating fall from grace after sex misconduct claims. Then, on the verge of a comeback, his shocking death in an LA mansion. Private living Dr. Conrad Murray goes on trial. HLN bringing you the whole story from the beginning to the end. The final guilty verdict. The mysterious life and death of music superstar Michael Jackson.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 3 sisters and 6 brothers.
People identify with Michael Jackson because they actually grew up with him.
I think of him as a young kid performing with the Jackson 5. They had all those great songs like I Want You Back. Such a precocious, such a talented kid.
So we have Ronnie on the organ and Johnny on the drums.
Hey, Mike, can I have the mic back? just for a second. You don't feel comfortable without it either. How long you been singing?
For 3 years.
So you went to grab it right away. Gonna snatch it right out of my hand there. Was I right? Are you 9 or 10? I've forgotten.
9.
He looked so happy all the time. He was so excited in front of the audience. He just moved you so much. But then you learn about the things that were going on behind the scenes.
I think that Michael was a victim of his own talent, of his own ambition, of his father's ambition.
Joe Jackson took his kids, threw them up on the stage for the world to see. Here are my kids, full of talent, full of life, get to work.
Joe Jackson, according to Michael, would rehearse them with a belt in his hands. And if they made a mistake, he came down hard on them. He was so terrified of his father, he would sometimes regurgitate when his father walked in the room.
I've talked to dozens of child stars, maybe now hundreds, and they all tell me the same thing. Being a child star is not so bad, and being under the scrutiny of the public is not so bad. But if there's trouble at home, if the parenting is dysfunctional, if the family's not working, then that child star is going to end up in a very bad place.
All that stuff going on behind the scenes when he was a kid was making him into the man he would become, for better or for worse.
Through Michael's teenage years, we really got to see him evolve to this young man. Big hits like Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. We'll never forget that.
Let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance, let's shout.
All right, so then he did this huge album on his own. Off the Wall, it had songs like Rock With You.
Rock with you all night.
And people were like, oh, look at Michael Jackson on his own going solo. Then came Thriller.
I remember very distinctly when Billie Jean was rolling out onto the radio.
For 40 days and for 40 nights, I was on the side. But who can stand when she's in demand? Her schemes and plan.
I'll never forget the first time I actually got it home and I dropped the needle and I listened to it all the way through. And I remember sitting on the floor of my room just mesmerized.
The first time we saw Michael Jackson do the moonwalk was during that Motown 25th anniversary special.
And you look at that and you go, whoa, what was that? Was that man levitating?
I think about the Thriller video. The day it came out on MTV, I remember my entire family watched it, and it just takes your breath away. I mean, videos up until then were kind of like background music for a song. now he made a song into a movie, and it was this whole horror theme.
What's the problem?
I thought that he was at his handsomest right there, like he had grown out of the gangly teenager stage, and he was a young man.
At the height of his fame, really, there's nobody bigger than Michael Jackson.
And his fans were insane.
There was just an incredible scene when Michael Jackson got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
How long have you been here?
Since 4 a.m. this morning.
I mean, there's crowds there, kids everywhere, police trying to keep control.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Jackson.
I mean, that's how crazy people were about Michael Jackson.
In 1984, he is at the peak of his popularity. Pepsi signs him to do a commercial. And then through unspeakable bad luck, something really, really terrible happens during the filming.
His hair just caught on fire. I remember seeing that footage that Us magazine released in 1999. I will never forget this for as long as I live. You see a single flame coming out of his head. Then the flame gets bigger and bigger, and then it's almost engulfing his entire head.
He had burns on his scalp, on his face.
Imagine what that feels like.
I really felt so bad for him, like he must have been in so much pain.
We didn't know it then, but that's really where the seeds of destruction were planted.
In the 80s, Michael Jackson was invincible, rising from a child phenomena to the king of pop. But in an instant, his dynasty begins to crumble amidst claims of child molestation.
I remember a time when you thought about Michael Jackson, you thought about the music, songs like Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. The music, the videos, the singing, that's what it was all about.
And somewhere towards the pinnacle of his career, things took a turn.
The longer he was a star, it was almost like the weirder he got, or to be fair, the weirder he appeared to be.
At first, his eccentricities were intriguing and they were fun. And then it crossed a line at some point and just became a freak show. The surgical mask, the bizarre shopping sprees, the sleeping in the hyperbaric chamber, it all became too much.
I remember the Leave Me Alone video. Oh boy, Michael Jackson went off on the media. He had the Elephant Man bones in it because he was rumored to have purchased those, and then Bubbles, the chimpanzee, his pet chimpanzee that everybody thought was strange.
But I think Michael Jackson, in the end, enjoyed the attention. As long as they're talking about Michael Jackson, he's still the king of pop.
He was, in fact, playing the media, because at the same time that he wanted to be a recluse, he also wanted the public to love him, the public to watch him, and that's part of the tragedy of the guy.
We also saw him begin to physically change.
The plastic surgery with Michael Jackson, that was something that I think convinced everyone that something was wrong with him.
They were calling him Wacko Jacko for a while, and there he was, you know, decreasing the size of his nose continuously, turning his skin different colors.
I think the first thing that people didn't understand, especially in the African-American community, is why is such a proud black man making himself white? I know a lot of us struggled with that because he was a symbol for our generation, yet it seemed like he didn't want to be black. Later, we found out he had vitiligo, and that was part of the reason why he changed his skin color, but it just seemed like something more.
And the easiest sort of conclusion to draw from that is that if you don't like what's going on the inside, if you don't like who you are on the inside, it's difficult to like what you see on the outside. And it seemed like this was a desperate attempt to change, to do something different, to alter who he was. And going from the outside in was clearly not the right tact.
Then he had this gigantic spread, which he called Neverland, which was really a playground for children.
And this was supposed to be his refuge, his sanctuary.
Some things about Neverland just didn't seem quite right. Here's a man living like a child.
It, of course, was an expression of his trauma and the fact that he was very developmentally stuck.
I went to Neverland, and Neverland is as crazy and as grandiose as everybody says it is. It is huge, it is sprawling, there's a Ferris wheel, there was a zoo, there were pools, there's a train.
Whether you could say that Michael Jackson was the child who was going to play in Neverland, or it was a way to lure children to him to play in Neverland, I really don't have the answer.
But Michael Jackson's image would, at a certain point, cross the line and go from being eccentric to something that was potentially dangerous. In 1993, Michael Jackson was accused by a 13-year-old boy of molestation.
We're not prepared to comment on the search warrants at this time. I cannot give you any details of the direction of the investigation at this point.
Michael Jackson seemed like the man that everybody would trust their children with. And now we hear this. So it made us think, what is going on with this guy?
I recall very distinctly when Michael Jackson appeared on television to tell the world his side of the story.
There have been many disgusting statements made recently concerning allegations of improper conduct on my part. These statements about me are totally false.
There are those close to Michael who would say that is something that he never recovered from ever in his life.
I have been forced to submit to a dehumanizing and humiliating examination by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department and the Los Angeles Police Department earlier this week. They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my penis, my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted.
The case was eventually settled out of court, but the damage to his reputation was done.
The other thing that came out of that video was his admission that he was an addict. He was addicted to prescription drugs.
As you may already know, after my tour ended, I remain out of the country undergoing treatment for a dependency on pain medication.
The fact that he was bold enough to get in front of everybody and sort of level what everybody had been thinking and saying, yes, I had this addiction to pain medications issue, I thought that was pretty brave of him.
This medication was initially prescribed to see the excruciating pain that I was suffering after recent reconstructive surgery on my scalp.
Addictions typically sneak up on people. Usually people, like in Michael's case, have a burn, have an injury where it's appropriately that they're given pain medicine and maybe sleeping medicine, and then things slowly escalate.
This is something he obviously struggled with the rest of his life, and it may very well have played a role in his death.
I've heard from many sources that he's, on many occasions, wanted to get treatment. It's not as though he himself didn't engage in any attempts at recovery. The problem is that, you know, with opiate addiction, pain medicine addiction, it requires sustained structure, and that was probably a very difficult thing to maintain with Michael Jackson.
Michael's image was getting hammered. But then, out of the blue, what does he do? He gets married.
Well, the marriage to Lisa Marie Presley is almost predictable in a certain weird kind of way, because here you have these two kids growing up in this bizarre environment.
Two phantoms who had lived a similar life in a similar place and sort of understood one another in a way that perhaps the rest of us can't.
So think about it. The king of pop marries the daughter of the king of rock and roll. It was a headline writer's dream. And then there was that whole kind of weird moment on stage at the MTV Awards, I think it was, where he kissed her, and it was awkward, and he said something like, and they said it wouldn't last. Well, of course it didn't last.
Then, out of the blue, Michael gets married again to the most unlikely candidate.
Debbie Rowe was the assistant to his plastic surgeon, and they got married only after Debbie was pregnant with Michael and Debbie's first child.
Michael would go on to have 2 other kids, and it seems like he was trying to establish that he wanted to have a normal life.
One of the really interesting things about Michael Jackson, and I've had this confirmed from people inside his inner circle, evidently he was a very good father.
But even when it came to his kids, it seemed like Michael just couldn't stay out of trouble.
The worst thing Michael Jackson did was dangle that little baby blanket over a hotel balcony when he was in Berlin. And everybody just went crazy when they saw that footage.
At least the angle of photographs that we had suggested that he was being silly, and in doing so was endangering a child's life, which as a parent was deeply troubling, to say the least.
God, that picture, I mean, it'll never go out of my head. I can picture it right now. I see it. And so does everybody else.
I remember the Martin Bashir documentary.
If there were no children on this earth, if somebody announced all kids are dead, I would jump off the balcony immediately. I'm done.
This was Michael Jackson's effort to get the world to see who he was, but it completely backfired.
The thing that stuck out in most people's minds, stuck out in Martin Bashir's minds, and ultimately became a legal matter was how Michael talked about sharing his bed with young kids.
The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone.
He wanted to show us how innocent I think he was and how he lived his life, and nobody could believe that a grown man would live like this.
I think he really believed that there was nothing wrong with it. Obviously, that proved to be a much different story.
And we could see Michael Jackson's life just spiraling out of control. And the question was, where was this all going to end?
You know, in the beginning, he started out as this vibrant person, just full of life. And as the trial kept going on, he just seemed more and more beaten down. You could just tell that his whole world was collapsing around him.
Music superstar Michael Jackson spends most of his life in the spotlight, entertaining, mystifying the world. But when allegations of child abuse with young boys surfaces again, the spotlight's glare turns harsh. Jackson lands in court, accused of the unthinkable.
CNN has confirmed through two different sources that a grand jury that's been meeting for 13 days here in Santa Barbara to hear testimony and consider charges of child molestation against pop star Michael Jackson has, in fact, indicted Michael Jackson.
That 2005 indictment and trial of Michael Jackson, that was a huge story because on the one hand, you have the biggest star in the world, and on the other hand, he's being accused of something so heinous.
And you got to think Michael Jackson was a little oblivious to the seriousness of the crime that he's being accused of. I mean, he appears in court and jumps up on top of an SUV.
Here's a guy who is arraigned on the most serious charges you can imagine, child molestation, and he gets up and performs on his SUV for the crowd outside the courthouse.
It didn't take long for the trial to start affecting Michael. You know, in the beginning, he started out as this vibrant person, just full of life. And as the trial kept going on, he just seemed more and more beaten down. You could just tell that his whole world was collapsing around him.
I watched him every day walk in, and as it wore on, he got thinner and thinner and more frail. And it looked like he was slowly dying. It really did. I was there when Michael Jackson showed up late to court in his pajamas, and honestly, on my deathbed, that's one of the scenes that's going to flash by.
He looked terrible. You could see and sense the pressure that Michael Jackson was feeling, especially on that day at his trial.
Well, what I think was actually happening during that 2005 molestation trial was that he was using substances to deal with the anxiety and maybe shame he was feeling at having been accused of this, whether he'd actually done something or not. It's a very shameful thing to be accused of. And that then, as he escalated the pain medication and the anxiety medicine, of course, it's common for addicts to feel more pain and to perpetuate the need for more medication. So as this went along, I think that's when the medication really spiraled out of control.
The people of the state of California, plaintiff versus Michael Joe Jackson, defendant. We, the jury in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in count 1 of the indictment.
He survived it with 14 acquittals, but was damage done to his soul, to his spirit, to his gentle, kind way of looking at the world? I suspect so.
It seemed like Michael Jackson was just destroyed, and it almost seemed like we would never hear from him again.
Once that was over, even after acquitted of all charges, Michael fled the country, and that was really the last we saw of him in a major way until 2009.
Welcome back. I'm Nancy Grace. Thank you for being with us. In the years after his acquittal for child molestation, Jackson stays out of the limelight. Many in his inner circle say the music legend is never the same. Rumor, innuendo haunting him. But in the summer of 2009, Jackson on the verge of a comeback. A comeback cut short.
This will be it. This is it. And when I say this is it, it really means this is it. This is the final curtain call.
This is it. This is Michael Jackson in all his glory, making that comeback.
I'll be performing the songs my fans want to hear.
Tonight, Michael's big return. Can he become the king of pop once again?
Now, I'm thinking to myself, why has he waited so long?
He said to me, very interesting, it was very poignant. He said, I'm doing it now because my kids are old enough to appreciate what I do, and I'm still young enough to do it.
I actually was concerned. I'd seen no evidence that his substance use was being dealt with, and here he was going to go on this very strenuous tour.
When he announced the comeback tour, I thought, well, I guess people are forgetting all the allegations, and people are now concentrating on his talent again, which was enormous.
We got the chance to see behind the scenes of the comeback tour when they eventually released the concert documentary, This Is It. It turns out that that video ended up being our ability to see what Michael Jackson was like in his last days.
I knew, given the technology of 2009, he was going to do something extraordinary, and that's what we really got to see in the movie. Green screen technology that was used to create the tens of thousands of soldier-like people.
They were going to have a 3D part of this concert.
We saw the ghouls from Thriller leaping off the screen at us. I think a lot of people got to see a side of Michael that they rarely got to see before, because you saw Michael, the producer.
You know, I'm going to want that more, right? It's funkier. I'm not feeling that part enough.
You saw Michael, the choreographer.
No.
You saw him explaining exactly how he thought things should be done.
It's got a moment where it has to simmer.
I wanted to see, what did Michael Jackson look like? How did he perform? And I was blown away. My jaw was hanging during the entire movie. Oh my gosh, look at Michael Jackson. He's dancing, he's moving.
On the other hand, there were these stories coming out saying that, well, Michael Jackson is sick.
He was anemic. And the evidence is he couldn't get warm at the Staples Center as he rehearsed. If you look at that movie, which everyone goes, oh, look at Michael Jackson, how wonderful and good condition. No, no, no. He is wearing 3 layers of shirts, and you can see them in those pictures.
I was following the story of Michael Jackson's preparations for his concert, and I remember hearing that Michael Jackson wanted his own personal doctor.
He said, you don't understand, okay, my body is what fuels this entire venture. I need my own physician with me 24/7, okay? That's not negotiable.
My personal opinion is that having a personal physician is a terrible idea for any celebrity, because there are systems in place to take care of patients properly. To have a personal physician for an addict or somebody with psychiatric problems is a recipe for very serious trouble.
The people who saw Michael Jackson at rehearsal that last night of his life say he was amazing up on that stage.
The rehearsals that I had with Michael Jackson, I saw a really strong, confident, excited individual who was very, very excited about returning to the stage. And it was nothing different about the last day of rehearsal.
The only thing that might have been out of the ordinary is that Michael had a serious glow about him that night. You know, some of the band members was like, look at MJ, what's going on with him tonight, man? He's just feeling it. And that last night he looked back at me as if to say, yeah, I'm Michael Jackson, I got this.
have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 50 years old, sir.
We're on our way. I'm just passing these questions on to my paramedics while they're on the way there, sir.
Thank you, sir. He's pumping his chest, but he's not responding to anything, sir. Please.
Michael Jackson was the patient on this 911 call, that they picked him up and they took him to the UCLA Medical Center, which is not too far.
My brother, the legendary king of pop, Michael Jackson, passed away on Thursday, June 25th, 2009 at 2:26 p.m. Our family requests that the media please respect our privacy during this tough time. And may Allah be with you, Michael, always.
There's a number of things that go through your head when a huge celebrity like that dies. First off, it's almost like you go, I'm not surprised at that. I mean, look at the lifestyle. But then the other side of you goes, gosh, they were so young, and I've been following them forever. They have so much left to give. How can this be?
The global reaction was, what? Now? Right at this point when he's about to have his big comeback? It was such a disappointment to his fans.
Then you see the shots of the vigils that were forming everywhere. Outside of the hospital, outside of the Apollo Theater in New York City. We saw people lining the streets, people crying, people trying to celebrate.
The memorial was just a huge, huge event. You had Mariah Carey singing, "I'll Be There."
Where there is love, I'll be there.
And Jennifer Hudson singing, "Will You Be There?" We saw Michael Jackson's friends and family all come together to sing that touching version of "Heal the World."
We remember this man by celebrating his life and all of the love that he brought to our own lives for half a century.
What we knew at the moment it was happening would be the iconic moment of that day was when Michael's daughter Paris got before the microphone and told the world exactly how she felt about the King of Pop, her father.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
I think everybody was just really taken by Paris, and it was evident that she obviously wanted to say something about her father, make us all understand him a little bit more. I think she really stole people's hearts.
The world was astounded to see what beautiful, articulate, well-balanced children these seemed to be.
To see it and hear it, I think made Michael Jackson a much more real person.
I actually feel very sorry for Dr. Murray. I think he got himself into a situation where he was way over his head in an area that he didn't truly understand.
Jackson's tragic and suspicious death leaves the world wondering how it could happen. Who's responsible? Authorities point the finger at Jackson's private live-in doctor, Conrad Murray.
Police searched the Houston office of Michael Jackson's personal doctor, that is Conrad Murray.
This is the doctor that was with Michael Jackson at the time of his death.
The first big break in Michael Jackson's death investigation came just weeks after his death. There were a series of surprise raids on the offices and the home of Michael Jackson's personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray.
Investigators truly searching every facet of Dr. Murray's life. They're obviously looking for evidence of manslaughter, as you put it there, Vinny. He's definitely in the hot seat with what has gone on here.
So now you've got DEA agents raiding his offices, raiding his homes, trying to get those records, trying to find that evidence, trying to figure out how Michael Jackson died and whether or not this man, this doctor, Conrad Murray, is criminally responsible. Who is this guy, and how did he end up becoming Michael Jackson's personal physician?
Dr. Conrad Murray was born in Grenada, and he got his medical degree right here in the United States. He started out in California, and then he moved on to Nevada, and that was where he met Michael Jackson back in 2006.
Michael Jackson's kids get sick. He takes them to Conrad Murray.
And he had done a good job on one of the children, so Michael Jackson said, "Can you join me on my tour?" He seemed like any other doctor. Cardiologist, had practices in 3 different states, successful doctor, successful heart surgeon.
I don't know why Dr. Murray felt it appropriate to be the sole caretaker of a complicated patient like this. That's something that sort of never should be done.
Details start to come out about Dr. Murray's past. Turns out this doctor has had serious money problems for years.
He's behind in his mortgage. He's getting sued for unpaid rent, hundreds of thousands of dollars from his different practices and homes around the country.
And here's the thing that stands out to me more than anything else. 7 children by 6 different women. It sounds irresponsible.
And then we find out Dr. Murray's getting paid $150,000 a month. $150,000 for just one patient. Not a bad payday.
It wasn't just a monthly fee that he was being paid for. He was leaving 2 practices, one in Houston, one in Nevada.
Of course he had to leave all of his patients, but he tried to replace a fee that represented the care of hundreds or even thousands of patients by the care of one. And that's, again, troublesome. When a patient is paying exorbitant fees to a physician, it's an adulteration of the relationship.
There's another side to the Dr. Murray story, and that's what makes this case all the more interesting. His patients love him. They swear by him. They say he's the greatest doctor.
I know for a fact, just knowing the man, he did everything possible to keep Michael Jackson alive.
I just can't see him being the person that he's being painted to be. I just can't see that. That's not the person that I know.
I want to thank all of my patients and friends who have sent such kind emails.
Suddenly, Dr. Conrad Murray breaks his silence by making his first public statement by posting a video on YouTube.
Please, don't worry. I will be fine. I told the truth, and I have faith the truth will prevail.
Little did we know his video on YouTube would come one day before a huge announcement in this investigation.
Now, a bombshell from police sources. Michael Jackson's death will be ruled a homicide case.
What's shocking is the way he died, I think, more than the fact that he did.
A search warrant affidavit unsealed just hours ago, and I've been pouring through it right up until airtime, exposes the minute-by-minute account of Dr. Conrad Murray's attempts to put Michael Jackson to sleep that day. According to the report, Dr. Murray is called to Michael Jackson's home at about 1 a.m., and he then proceeds to spend the next 9 hours trying to get Michael Jackson to go to sleep with a slew of different sedatives and sleep aids.
The combination of drugs and the doses of those drugs and the route of administration would be enough to put a dozen people to sleep for a week.
He didn't just want to go to sleep. He didn't want to have a dream. He didn't want to remember. He wanted to black out.
According to the coroner's preliminary finding, the cause of death is the surgical anesthetic propofol.
Propofol is a short-acting barbiturate that we use in emergency rooms, ICUs, and for certain procedures. It's something that I've never seen outside of a hospital. It's not a typical drug of addiction because no one can get access to it.
One of his nurses said Michael Jackson came to me and begged me for his milk, and that's what he called propofol, his milk.
And I said, Michael, if you take that medicine, you might not wake up.
So there's evidence that he had a long history with propofol long before he met Dr. Conrad Murray.
He wanted to help him. get off of the use of propofol to sleep.
This is not about sleeping. That is drug withdrawal he is in. Let's be super clear about this. Insomnia is a symptom, it's not a diagnosis. There is no way that he could have been taking what he took the night he died and tolerated that without having been on substances all along.
Once somebody's an addict, they are never supposed to use mood-altering substances again, ever, unless absolutely medically necessary.
Dr. Conrad Murray's attorneys claim that Dr. Murray did not know what trouble Michael Jackson was in when he accepted this job, and I have no doubt that is true. But once he got in there and discovered what he was dealing with, he should have assembled a team. That was his responsibility.
Michael Jackson's personal doctor facing charges in his death.
You know, involuntary manslaughter, the maximum he's going to get is 4 years. So for the fans of Michael Jackson, the family of Michael Jackson, this is outrageous, right? Really? You kill somebody, you get 4 years?
Justice for Michael.
I'm a former prosecutor. I know this is a tough case for prosecutors because the last thing Conrad Murray wanted to do was have Michael Jackson die.
I think charging him with voluntary manslaughter was their way of saying, this is what we can prove in this case.
No, it's not murder one. No, it's not capital murder. But for a man who's a doctor, this is absolutely serious stuff. You're talking about the end of his livelihood and going to prison.
I actually feel very sorry for Dr. Murray. I think he got himself into a situation where he was way over his head in an area that he didn't truly understand.
Whatever has been made of Dr. Murray, Michael Jackson and he were friends, and he's personally upset about the fact that his friend has died.
In a way, the fact that they were friends, to me, that doesn't matter. What matters is just one thing. Did he do his duty to his patient?
Politically outspoken, actress Ellen Barkin dishes with joy about the Republican candidates and staying beautiful after 50. Plus Larry King, Joy Behar, HLN Monday night, 10 Eastern. Monday at 5, HLN Special Report with Vinnie Politan. Everything you want to know about the trials you'll be talking about. Monday, 5 Eastern on HLN. HLN Monday night. Allegations of child sex abuse. Similarities between how they were being handled by Penn State and the Roman Catholic Church. Dr. Drew looks at whether those involved failed to protect the innocent. Dr. Drew, HLN Monday night, 9 Eastern.
Every day, HLN finds the moments that connect us all with news, views, and the people at the heart of the story. This is what we do. HLN, News and Views.
Michael Jackson's private live-in doctor, Conrad Murray, accused of involuntary manslaughter in the music icon's death. On the eve of trial, there's no shortage of anticipation about what will happen inside that LA courtroom.
I am an innocent man. I therefore plead not guilty. Thank you.
I think the level of celebrity of Michael Jackson alone is going to make this an incredible trial to watch.
What makes this case so unique is that you're going to have a criminal trial for a person accused of killing the world's most famous person. Do prosecutors get the benefit of being on the side with the celebrity rather than trying to prosecute the celebrity?
I think there are a lot of people out there who think, well, it's open and shut. Dr. Conrad Murray killed Michael Jackson. The only people who knew what went on in that room are Dr. Conrad Murray and Michael Jackson. And Michael Jackson isn't around anymore.
The first thing that the prosecution needs to do here is establish that Conrad Murray's not just Conrad Murray, he's Dr. Conrad Murray. And you've got to build him up. and make this jury believe that he has an obligation, he is the person in charge. And then make sure that this jury realizes that Michael Jackson isn't some sort of strung-out, freakish drug addict. This is a patient, someone who relies upon his doctor. The other big issue in this case is going to be timeline, timeline, timeline. Where was Conrad Murray? How long did he leave the room? Was he gone for just 2 minutes, or was he gone for a much longer period of time?
How come he waited so long to call 911? How come he didn't have the proper monitoring equipment? How come he gave him propofol? There are a slew of things that Dr. Conrad Murray allegedly did that are way outside the normal realm of medical practice.
The defense strategy is going to be very interesting in this case. The defense doesn't have to prove a thing. They can sit back and simply attack the prosecution's case if they want to.
How do you prove that it was the doctor? Or how does the defense raise a doubt that, hey, it could have been Michael that did it?
Dr. Murray's defense team is going to say that they believe Michael Jackson either self-injected or drank that propofol. And you know what? There's no eyewitness, there's no smoking gun that can say that that didn't happen.
I always say it, a trial is a search for the truth. And here, hopefully, at the end of this case, there'll be an answer to that question as to how and why and who is responsible for the death of the King of Pop.
What happened on the night of June 25th, 2009? The biggest question I want answered is, if Dr. Murray would have acted in a certain way, would Michael Jackson still be alive today?